Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast, Field Goals and Forecasts. As always, I am your host, Ryan Adio, and of course, the Wildcard weekend of the NFL has just concluded. I can't believe I'm saying that actually. 3 more weeks left if you count the Super Bowl. The NFL season is quickly coming to an end, but we have to deal with the playoffs first, obviously, and of course there's some news around the league that I want to talk about as well. So we'll do that, and then we'll jump into some game recaps, and then I'll give my expert picks for next week here. But yeah, let's jump right into the news here. Let's just talk about some coaches being hired and fired. Some interesting ones, some ones that I didn't think I would actually be saying here. But, of course, the Patriots hire Mike Vrabel as their next head coach after they just fired Gerard Mayo last week, 2 weeks ago, after the Week 18 win against the Bills, and they hire Mike Vrabel. I mean, feels like everyone saw this one coming. Former Patriot Mike Vrabel, who was the former head coach of the Tennessee Titans, didn't have any real large job after the Titans, and is now the Patriots head coach. A homecoming for him, almost, you would say. So, very expected there, at least. The Cowboys will mutually agree to part ways with head coach Mike McCarthy. Now, here's one that I actually wasn't expecting. I thought that Jerry Jones and the Cowboys were going to stick with their guy. They were going to stick with Mike McCarthy, even though his track record, even though his miscues in the playoffs, even though his miscues in the regular season, even though with all the talent on their roster that they still can't get anything done. But no, they decide to not renew his contract. And a lot of teams actually looking at him, which surprises me. Just, again, based on his track record, like I mentioned before. And other than that, any real big ones here, I would say Falcons fired their defensive coordinator, Jimmy Lake. As a Falcons fan, I can tell you this is huge news for us. I shouldn't say us, but huge news for the Falcons. Jimmy Lake and that defense, just terrible play calling over and over. If you listen to some earlier episodes, I could even tell you that I wanted him out, and just wasn't working with the talent the way that he needed to, and he wasn't getting it done at all on defense. And finally got rid of him. He was one of the main reasons why the Falcons actually lost, especially those last 2 games of the season where the offense puts it into overtime and the defense just unable to finish those games out. Other than that, the divisional round is now locked in. For those of you that don't know, on Saturday, January 18th, the Texans will take on the Chiefs at 4:30. That is your first game of 4. And then the same day on Saturday, Commanders at Lions at 8 p.m. That's the 6th seed versus the 1 seed, I believe. Yeah. Yes, that is the 6th seed versus the 1 seed. I was thinking about it there a little bit. 6th seed versus 1 seed at 8 p.m. on Saturday. Sunday, January 19th, it is the Rams versus the Eagles at 3 p.m. That should be a good one. That's going to be a good game. 2 high-powered defenses, as we saw last night. We'll talk about that. And, of course, the Rams and the Eagles have a very high-powered yet slow as of recent, I should say, offenses. And we'll see which offense wants to step up in that game. But, again, I'll talk about that later. And to wrap it up, the Ravens at the Bills at 6:30 p.m. 2 of the AFC giants, both MVP favorites, take on each other at 6:30 p.m. on Sunday. All 4 of those games, I would say, are pretty good games. Maybe beside the first 2, Texans-Chiefs, we saw that earlier in the season. Hopefully it's not a replay of that game. And, of course, Commanders-Lions. Hopefully the Commanders have enough fight in them to take on the supergiant of the Lions. But let's get into some game recaps here. Starting off with our first game, Chargers at Texans. That game was 32-12 for the Texans. Kind of a shocker there. A lot of people thought that the Chargers were going to take this one, but no, Chargers came out, looked kind of strong, I guess you'd say, and then were unable to get anything done on offense, especially in the second half. Justin Herbert completely choked again. Again, in his 2 playoff games, he has choked. I guess the first one wasn't completely his fault, but just unable to get anything done in the playoffs, especially when it matters most. He went 14 for 32, 240 yards, a touchdown, and the big one, 4 interceptions. 4 interceptions. And, of course, this is the Chargers, Herbert's second playoff game. The first one was the 27-0 in just absolute collapse against the Jaguars when they came back down 27-0 against the Chargers, and they lost that one. And that was 2 years ago, I believe. Yeah, that was a big playoff game for them. And of course, Herbert just going over his season total for interceptions in one game against this tough Texans defense that really stepped up. And of course, it all had to go through the air. The Chargers were unable to get anything on the run game going. Dobbins had 9 carries for 26 yards. Not really like him. Not really like Jim Harbaugh, where we see him, power running, the single back, running up the gut that we saw at Michigan. No, none of that there. It was all Justin Herbert. Again, he had 32 pass attempts. And of course, when you throw in 4 interceptions, the offense isn't really going to have the ball very often. So, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. But at least, Chargers fans, you can look forward to Ladd McConkey, as he is definitely the future in Los Angeles. He had 9 receptions for almost 200 yards, 3 yards short of 200 yards, and a touchdown in this game. But the big story here is the Texans defense has completely stepped up. They are an entire level up from what we saw in the regular season. Maybe it was a bad Chargers offense, but at least you can say the defense completely stepped up in this one, forcing 4 interceptions against Herbert. And of course, the offense for the Texans, it was good, but not great. It was good. It was pretty underwhelming for most of the season. Most of the regular season, the Texans offense was pretty slow. We saw that game against Baltimore. They only put up, the defense put up 2 points, and that's all they scored the entire game. Pretty underwhelming for most of the season, but Stroud was pretty good in this game. He wasn't really the team's X factor, if you ask me. It was really Joe Mixon. He completely led the comeback and, iced the game almost at the end there. 25 carries, 25 carries for 100-ish yards. And, of course, that, fourth quarter, 4th and 1, where he just completely iced the game against the Chargers. And, Nico Collins went off against his former head coach. 7 receptions, 122 yards, and a touchdown. His former head coach, Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. And Stroud, he played well. He had an explosive 14-play, 99-yard drive. 34-yard completion to Xavier Hutchinson on 3rd and 16 after he fumbled a snap. That was really the turning point in the game. The Chargers had him on their heels, but Stroud makes just kind of an improbable play and leads the comeback for the Texans. Not what I was expecting out of this game at all. I'll tell you what, I didn't think the Texans were going to win this one. They have a tough uphill climb next week against the Chiefs, but if they play like they did this week, we might see another upset from them. Other than that, I don't really have much else to talk about for that game. Stroud does have to step it up still, I think, if they want to end up beating the Chiefs in the AFC here. But Joe Mixon, at least, that's something to look forward to. He has been pretty slow recently, and finally having his kind of comeback game a little bit here. Like I said, 106 yards and a touchdown, I believe. And then Steelers-Ravens is our next game. Another kind of disappointing game, if you ask me. 28-14. The Ravens just dominated this one from the start. The Steelers really didn't have much a chance. They went 95 yards on just their opening drive alone. And the Ravens were up 21-0 midway kind of through the third quarter. So this one was kind of a blowout for most of the game. The Steelers did try to come back with a few explosive plays. Russ had a few really nice deep ball passes, but it was just too little too late, honestly. The Steelers scored 14 in the last 2 quarters only. Pickens had 5 receptions, 87 yards, a touchdown. But the Steelers' offense wasn't the focal point in this game. It was definitely the Ravens' rush offense. Derrick Henry absolutely just cooked the Steelers' defense. 26 carries, almost 200 yards, 14 yards shy of 200, 186, and 2 touchdowns for the Ravens. Anytime he got the ball, it seemed like he was just in a seam, breaking away, and the Steelers could not find a way to stop him. And the air attack was even good for the Ravens as well. It wasn't needed, but it was so consistent. Lamar Jackson was 16 for 21, 175 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Isaiah Likely leads the team in receptions, again with Zay Flowers out. He had 3 receptions and 53 yards, and that was their leading receiver. 53 yards, that's really crazy. But the Steelers defense just did not do enough to step up, especially TJ Watt. He was just unheard of almost in this entire game. They only had 1 sack. They really couldn't stop Derrick Henry. They really couldn't stop the pass game when it was when the Ravens even had to use it. And the Steelers have relied on their defense for so long. That was why they got to this point. It wasn't their offense, right? So when the offense couldn't step up and the defense couldn't step up, that's why any team would lose. But if at least the defense stepped up, maybe, kept it to a 17-14 game, we would have had a different outcome. But the Ravens just got up so fast, and the Steelers just could not make the comeback. But the Ravens are a scary, scary team. Again, this was a divisional game, so I know the Ravens only scored 28, but in a divisional game, that is very impressive, and especially against your sort of rivals here. Oh, I shouldn't say sort of. Against your rivals and the Steelers, you put up 28 points. It was a boring game, but we got to see how versatile the Ravens really are, and the Steelers just went cold at the wrong time at the end of the season there, and they were unable to come back from it. But let's talk about another team that kind of just went cold. The Broncos at the Bills, 31-7. Bills win this one. Broncos go cold after the first drive. Really, Bo Nix did all he could, but the Bills' defense stepped up. They stepped up after a really, really good first drive from the Broncos. And that was the main reason that the Bills won this one. I know there's 31 points on the board, don't get me wrong, but the Bills' defense stepped up in this game. They really proved that they are not just, this isn't just the Josh Allen show. They really proved that they are one of the reasons why this team is so good. No first-team All-Pros for the defense. I don't even think second-team All-Pro for the defense. But they held the Broncos to 7 points all game. And the Broncos' defense was ultimately their problem. Their offense was fine. Bo Nix really, when I say he did all he could, he was running out of the pocket. He was their leading rusher in the game. I believe he had 50-ish yards. He had 43 yards on 4 carries. Their next leading rusher was Javonte Williams with 7 carries for 29 yards. So he really was doing all he could. A lot of missed passes, a lot of dropped passes for the Broncos, which, obviously would hurt anyone. But they weren't able to get down the field. Their kicker misses a really makeable field goal. I think the Broncos will be scary if they can get some help for Bo Nix on the offense. I know Courtland Sutton is very good, but they need a running game. They need someone else on their receiving core. And, the Broncos defense just didn't step up. I actually saw Patrick Surtain just get cooked over and over and over. And he's highly regarded as the best corner in the league. So it was very weird almost to see him play the way that he did. But, the Bills' offense the Broncos could not find an answer to stop this Bills offense, and their defense ended up being the problem for them. And of course, the Bills' run game is really, again, what shines through. Don't get me wrong. The Bills, Josh Allen, pass game is great, right? Obviously, Josh, he misses some passes early on. He really couldn't find that rhythm. Broncos, they led the league in sacks this year. He was under a lot of pressure. He took his first sack in 4 or 5 weeks, right? And he had some bad misses. He wasn't able to, get the timing right. But then he figures it out, right? He goes 20 for 26, 272 yards, 2 touchdowns, and of course 8 carries for 46 yards, as he does. And he figures it out, He's the Bills never switched up their game plan, right? They were up 28-7, and they were throwing the ball with probably, I don't know, 10 minutes left. They were still throwing the ball. They never changed their game plan. They never went away, and they said, we're going to put as many points up as we can to prove that we are the Buffalo Bills. We are scary, right? They never went away from that. But the Bills' run game is what shined through here for the Bills. 23 carries, 120 yards, and a touchdown for James Cook. And Ty Johnson has honestly been such a secret weapon for the Bills. 9 carries, 44 yards. I know that's not super impressive, but 2 receptions for 26 yards and that huge touchdown where he got to the back of the end zone. Josh is 4th and 1, first of all. Terrible play call, don't get me wrong. But Josh makes magic happen, finds him in the back of the end zone, and Ty Johnson makes an amazing catch to kind of put this one out of reach. If the Broncos stop him there, maybe it's a different game. Maybe they get the momentum back. But momentum was all Buffalo for 98% of this game, right? But that was mostly led by the run game. And again, the Bills don't have that true wide receiver one yet. Curtis Samuel was their leading receiver in this one. 3 receptions, 68 yards. And, of course, a touchdown for him on that huge play. And that's why he had most of those yards. But, again, they just don't have that consistent wide receiver one every single week where you're like, oh, okay. Let's say A.J. Brown, right? I know Devontae Smith just outplayed him, so maybe that's a bad example. But every week you look and you're like, okay, Jamar Chase, he's the wide receiver one. You look, Nico Collins. All right, that's the wide receiver one. Even, I don't know, Jaden Reed. Consistent, you're seeing him at the top of the stat line 1 out of every 2 weeks. But the Bills don't have a guy like that. But Josh can still get this passing game going. Without a wide receiver one, he still has, 200, 300 yards. And I think that's why the Bills are so scary. You never really know where they're going to hit you from, and they can hit you from the ground. They can hit you from Curtis Samuel. They can hit you from the tight ends. Wherever the Bills need to implement a game plan, they are able to. And, of course, like I said earlier, the Broncos did not have that, they didn't have that rush game. They couldn't attack from different weapons. Their receivers were dropping passes. I don't even know if a tight end caught a ball for the Broncos all day. I know Audric Estime was out, but you can't have your QB be the leading rusher almost every week, especially not in the playoffs. And Bo Nix could not have been the leading rusher in this game if they wanted to win this one. I know they go down and they have to rely on the pass game, but if you want to get something going, you have to have that scary run game. And even when they were down, they didn't turn away from the pass game. Peyton continued to run, and it just wasn't working. Other than that, Bills really couldn't stop the QB run. Bo Nix was really running all over the Bills' defense. They only had 1 sack near the end of the game, kind of garbage time almost. And Bo just continues to roll around to the right and make big plays. Just weren't able to connect. But still, the Bills were unable to get real pressure on Bo Nix for most of the game, and they couldn't really get to it. They couldn't stop the QB scramble, and I think that's something they really have to improve on. They really have to start from scratch if they want to beat the Ravens next week. But I'll talk about that in a second. Let's move on to the Packers at the Eagles. This one was 22-10 for the Eagles. Both teams really started slow. The Packers obviously fumbled their opening kickoff, give the Eagles an easy touchdown just straight off the bat. But other than that, both offenses really started slow. Obviously, Jordan Love continued to be slow all game. Jordan Love continued to play poor all game. Let's just say that so I don't get flamed. But he ends up throwing 2 interceptions in the first half, and of course McManus misses a field goal as well. So the Packers, were just so down already. Your QB throws 2 interceptions, your kicker misses a field goal, your momentum's gone. You're giving the Eagles so many opportunities to just take the ball in short field and put up points on you, make this one farther and farther, make the comeback harder and harder to achieve. And of course, Love ended 20 for 33, 212 yards, 3 interceptions, and that will kill you. We saw it with Justin Herbert, who threw 4. You can't win a game with multiple interceptions. If you're getting in the 2, 3, 4 territory, you're already giving these high-powered offenses who are in the playoffs now. This isn't just a regular season game. If you're Jared Goff and you're throwing 5 interceptions against, who did he throw 5 interceptions against? If you're throwing, it doesn't matter. He threw 5 interceptions and he still won, because that Lions team, it was a regular season game and they're so high-powered where they can win in a shootout. But if you're not that kind of team, which the Packers really aren't, you can't throw 3 interceptions, give the Eagles so many opportunities, and expect to win this one, right? But of course, the Eagles probably could have put up way more points than they even did. I mean, Saquon obviously, stops the run at the end of the game, slides. They don't take those points. But other than that, they had so many opportunities to, what's the word I'm looking for here? So many opportunities to capitalize on, and they really didn't, because their offense was kind of in a slow start. The defense of the Eagles kept the Packers in, and they only scored 10 points, right? So they kept the Packers at bay, but the offense honestly couldn't really get going. Hurts was only 13 for 21 for the 130 yards, and he had those 2 touchdowns, which one of them was in short field. But the Eagles probably should have put this away way earlier. Jordan Love throws 2 interceptions in the first half. You should put this one should be put away in the first half. If you're the Eagles and you're so built on this high-powered offense, you have Saquon Barkley, you have A.J. Brown, you have Devontae Smith, you have Jalen Hurts, you have one of the best O-lines, if not the best O-line in the league, you need to put this one away sooner. You need to put up as many points as possible, and they just weren't able to do that. Obviously, Saquon didn't have a touchdown in the game, but he had 25 carries for 120 yards. And for the Packers, they just weren't able to get anything going in the pass game. A lot of their receivers ended up getting hurt, first of all. So obviously, Romeo Doubs gets hurt. Jaden Reed gets pretty banged up. And obviously, Christian Watson was out for the rest of the season. So who are they throwing it to, right? But they couldn't get anything going in the pass game. Josh Jacobs, though, was kind of the star for the Packers. 18 carries, 81 yards, touchdown. Really got them fired up when they needed him. But he scored their only touchdown. And when you're so behind, you can't rely on the run game like that. You have to do something in the pass game. And they just weren't able to. The Eagles' defense is so good. There aren't too many flaws on that defense. Maybe the edge rush, but other than that, their slot corner's great. They're Darius Slay and Quinion Mitchell, one of the best corner duos in the league probably. Plus Cooper DeJean, that is an elite secondary. Plus C.J. Gardner-Johnson, plus even Reed Blankenship, that is such an elite defense that it's going to be so hard to beat. And we'll see how they play the Rams next week, who are mostly a passing team. Don't get me wrong, Kyren Williams is very good, but we saw them come out with the pass, and of course I'll get into that later, but we saw them come out with the pass, and I mean, they were playing the Vikings, who, don't get me wrong, have one of the worst pass defenses, but that is how they get most of their points, is through the air. So we'll see if this Eagles defense can really shut them down, and I think they have a good shot to. But Packers defense was obviously put in some really bad situations. They held the Eagles to only 22 when they really, like I said, the Eagles could have put that one away early. And the offense played terrible. The defense was set up to play terrible. So when that happens, you're not going to be able to win. I kind of thought that was going to be the case coming into this one. Packers really haven't beat anyone good all season. And, well, we saw that division, besides the Lions, because we haven't seen them play yet, but we saw that division get tons and tons of wins and benefit from that, and then they show up in the postseason, and as of now, they're 0-2. So, take that as you will. But let's move on to the Commanders at the Buccaneers. The Commanders come away with this one, and honestly, can tell you why, right? Commanders win this one 23-20 off a last-minute field goal. Commanders, they didn't make any mistakes. They made no mistakes pretty much through the entire game. I mean, sure, I'm not saying they made no mistakes, right? You go 4 and out, you punt it. That's not really a mistake. That's going to happen to any team. You're in the playoffs. You're playing top-tier teams. You're going to hit some top-tier defenses. Not saying the Buccaneers defense is really not top-tier, but you're in the playoffs. I mean, this is a tough case scenario. You're not going to, test your luck on 4th down. Those aren't really mistakes. There were no interceptions, no fumbles. Commanders held the ball. They continued to run the clock. They just continued to have possession of the ball. We saw that. I noticed this when they were playing the Falcons. They just continued to have possession. If they don't give the Falcons the ball, if they don't give the Buccaneers the ball, they can't score, right? So Buccaneers go down the field and give them 4 minutes, and what do? They waste all 4 minutes. Get down the field and kick a field goal to win the game. I mean, it's just Dan Quinn is so unbelievably smart. I think that was honestly his game plan coming into this one. And now that they have an elite QB, well, a very, very good QB. I shouldn't say elite yet. We'll see. But now that they have this QB that can lead them, they can finally, just waste games almost. Buccaneers, they were playing their game, right? It's all offense for them. They have a banged up defense. They really can't do too much on defense when they don't have a lot of their starters, and especially I think Jamel Dean went out in this one as well, or something like that. I don't really remember. I'm going to be completely honest with you. But the Buccaneers made one mistake through the entire game, and that cost them. And that's so tough on a team, because one mistake really isn't that many, right? And when you look at it, we're seeing teams. I'm going to bring it back to Jared Goff. He threw 5 interceptions and won the game. Buccaneers had 1 fumble. Baker Mayfield had 1 fumble, and it cost them. And that's so tough to say, but that didn't put the game out of reach, but that put them in a pretty bad situation where they go down the field and kick a field goal, give the Commanders 4 minutes, and that's the last time they saw the field. It's just you can't rely on. I don't know. If I'm the Buccaneers there, I'm not going for a field goal. I don't think I can rely on my defense almost. I would rather try to get the touchdown there, I think. And it's tough. It's the playoffs. I know that's a really hard call to make. You want to tie the game. You want to say, let's bring out the defense. We'll rely on them. It's a rookie quarterback. We'll do what we can. But when you're playing Dan Quinn, when you're playing this team that is also relying mostly on its offense, it's hard to say, let's make this, let's tie the game, let's give them 4 minutes to get a field goal, right? But of course, Jaden Daniels played great. I'm not saying this is just all coaching, but this was such a tough game to lose for the Buccaneers, I guess. Daniels will join Flacco, Mark Sanchez, and Russell Wilson as the only quarterback to win their first road playoff start as a rookie. I wrote this down and kind of forgot about it, but the Commanders didn't have a turnover and they didn't punt. So I said earlier, they really didn't make a mistake. They just held the ball for so long. You took the ball away from the Buccaneers offense, which is their strong point. If they can do that against the Lions, we might see the Commanders go to the NFC championship, right? If they take the ball away from this high-powered Lions offense and say, hey, let's go against their banged-up defense. Let's fight against this banged-up defense over and over. Let's not punt. Let's not make any mistakes. That's how they're going to win this game. And honestly, it's going to be a good one because of that. Because Dan Quinn is so smart and because their game plan works so well. Obviously, Zane Gonzalez goes down, has the final minute doinking in, hits the upright and goes in. Can't believe that. But Terry McLaurin got his first postseason touchdown. Him and De'Ami Brown led the Commanders with both of them had 89 yards, which De'Ami Brown, if you don't know, I think he was a draft pick 2021, 2022, one of those two, 2021, I believe. Not a bad player at all, just waiting on him to kind of break out. I'm sure he's going to have to get re-signed in the offseason here, if not a free agent. But Terry McLaurin had 5 receptions. Or no, I'm sorry. Terry McLaurin had 7 receptions. De'Ami Brown had 5 receptions. Both had 89 yards, led the team. 89 yards isn't a huge amount of yards, but it is enough when you have 23 points and you're running the clock out. And somehow, the Commanders run the clock completely out, but they still don't have a good run game. I think their leading rusher, I don't even know. I'd have to look here. Hold on. I want to say their leading rusher might have been Jaden Daniels. Yeah, Jaden Daniels, 13 carries for 36 yards. Brian Robinson had 10 carries for 16 yards. Austin Eckler had 8 for 27. Just an inefficient run game. But they were able to march down the field, take time off the clock, and win this one. And I'm excited to see where they go. This is a really interesting game plan that we don't often see. Teams like to win in shootouts. They like to rely on their defense, but the Commanders said no. I guess we will rely on our defense, but we're just not going to rely on your offense. We're going to rely on our offense to do what they need to do, play mistake-free football, and run the clock out and win this one. And that's what they did. And I expect to see the same thing next week against the Lions. And finally, I'm going to jump into this last game here. Vikings at Rams. The Rams win this one 27-9, which is very surprising to me. I think the Rams really confused Darnold. They made him look like his 2018, 19, 20 self. And they bring out the side of him that we knew, obviously. But they just did too much defensively. I guess not too much defensively, but they did a lot defensively to confuse Darnold. And the Vikings really were not able to get a run game going either. So it was all on their pass game, and it was just destroyed. Chris Shula, the Rams defensive coordinator, absolute mastermind here. He's working with a kind of young, inexperienced defense, but is honestly making them so scary. And I know you can look at the stats, and they're kind of middle of the pack and everything. And I know whoever was the commentator said this last night, but when you look at the Rams defense, they are getting those tackles for losses. They're coming off the edge. They are playing hard. And their defensive scheme is so good. And it just destroys teams, you know? So the offense was the weaker part of the Rams in this game, which just isn't normal for them. Usually the Rams defense is so high-powered with, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Matthew Stafford, an okay offensive line. This is a really high-powered team on offense that usually is like winning in shootouts. We saw the Bills game where they won in a shootout. But no, this was all defense for the Rams. Again, they won this one 27-9. A touchdown and a field goal is the only thing that they allowed in this game. And they forced 9 sacks. 9 sacks on Sam Darnold. That's a playoff record. 9 sacks. Sam Darnold held on to the ball just way too long, obviously. And the Vikings line was just terrible. That's something that Sam Darnold's done forever. He's held on to the ball just too long, looking, trying to make something happen, and then he gets sacked, or he gets stripped sacks even. We saw that, and the Rams ran that one back in for a touchdown. So they knew who they were going against. They knew they were playing Sam Darnold, and just again, Chris Shula, great defensive scheme, and that is the reason that the Rams won this one. If the Rams can get their offense just back to that high power we saw against the Bills, they're going to be a team nobody wants to play. They're going to be such a high-powered team, such a scary team with this very good defense now. And this should be a really tough one. I'll talk about this in just a second here, but against the Eagles. Let me move on to my playoff picks here. I guess my quick picks for the week. 4 games, 4 predictions. I'll let you guys know what I got cooked up here. Texans at Chiefs. I'm going to take the Chiefs. Obviously, at Arrowhead, the Chiefs have had 3 total weeks of rest. I know nobody wants the Chiefs to win, don't get me wrong. I would love for the Texans to win this one. I just don't think they have it in them. The Texans were viewed as the weakest team in the AFC playoff a week ago. Their defense really stepped up. If it can step up the way it did, then make it a close game, but their offense needs to step up. Their offense needs to step up. There's a really tough defense. In the regular season, they were the number 1 team against the rush. Joe Mixon is kind of going to be taken out of this one. If CJ Stroud can step up, we might see a Texans team win, and a Texans team that would be really scary going in with their tough defense and their strong offense, but CJ Stroud has to step up first, and I just don't think that's going to happen. Chiefs are so good in the divisional round. I believe they're 6-0 with Patrick Mahomes. I just don't see it happening. Give me the Chiefs in this one. But let's move on. Commanders-Lions. I talked about this one. Commanders are just too young. I just don't think their game plan is going to work completely in this one. Give me the Lions. I think they win. I think they just put up too many points. The Commanders can't come back. The Commanders team is just still too young. They're still developing. There's not a ton of... Like, when you look at the Lions, they're such a stacked team. When you look at the Eagles, they're such a stacked team. When you look at the Commanders, there are a few flaws. They don't have a rush game, for one. Right? So they're just too raw, and they're very pass-heavy. And I think the Lions have a really good secondary. So as much as Daniels won't really get pressured as much because of the injuries for the Lions in the front 4, I do think the Lions are going to be able to stop them in the secondary. They're going to make them punt. They're going to make them play mistake football. But if the Commanders can hold on to the ball like they did against the Bucs, play that mistake-free football that they're so good at, just run the clock down. Don't give the ball to Jared Goff. They have a good chance of winning this one. But I don't think that's going to happen. Lions do have those injuries, like I said earlier, but they're rested. If it comes to a shootout, they're going to win it, and they're just too good to lose against the Commanders. I give me the Lions in this one. That might be a close game. That might be, an upset, and I think that would be the biggest upset, if not. But I told you why. We'll see if it happens, right? Rams versus Eagles, but last two here. I'm gonna take the Eagles. I still think the Eagles are the strongest team in the playoffs right now. The Eagles' defense is just so good. There's no flaws. No flaws on the offense, no flaws in the defense. They just have to figure out how to not start slow. If the Eagles' offense gets in that game, they get the ball first, or they get the ball even second, they go down the field and they score, and they don't start slow, and they just attack in every single way possible. They attack you through the pass, they attack you through the QB run, they attack you through Saquon Barkley. They are going to be so dangerous, and I don't think, against the Vikings, the run game wasn't working. You go down so much, and you're like, okay, Sam, we need you to pass. We need you to pass to win this one. And the Rams knew that, right? So they're sending, these corner blitzes. They're sending all the pressure to get to Sam Darnold. But the Eagles' offensive line, and their offense in general, is so good. I don't think the Rams, I keep saying the Vikings, I don't think the Rams will be able to confuse Jalen Hurts as much as they did Sam Darnold, and I think they're just too young still, besides for Matt Stafford. But other than that, I think they are just too young, and I think the Eagles are just too good. I think they win this one. They go to the NFC Championship. But I think, earlier in the season I would have told you this is going to be a really offensive game. But honestly, I think this is going to be a really defensive game, and it'll be up to whoever's offense steps up first, and that's going to be the one that'll win this one. The Rams will give the Eagles a run for their money. Like I said, if the Eagles don't start slow, they win this one. And even if they do start slow, but they pick it up and they put up a ton of points back to back to back to back, put the pressure on the Rams, I think they win this one. And finally, I would say my game of the week, the biggest game of the week, maybe the biggest game of the year. Give me the Ravens at the Bills. this one could really go either way. The Bills' defense gets a lot of important members back compared to last game against the Ravens. They didn't have Matt Milano. They didn't have Terrell Bernard. They didn't have Taron Johnson. Those are big names. That's a big deal. Matt Milano is a run stuffer. It could really go either way. I don't feel comfortable saying either, but the Bills are at home. We saw that they're now 9-0 at home. They destroy the Broncos at home. But the Ravens' rush attack just might be too much for the Bills. Derrick Henry absolutely ran all over them last time. And Lamar Jackson is so slippery, so scary, so versatile. And we saw the Bills could not contain the QB scramble against even Bo Nix. We saw him run, get on the bootleg. He was their leading rusher. With four rushes, 43 yards, that's more than 10 yards a rush. If that's Lamar Jackson, they're cooked. They can't stop the QB run. They can't win, right? Especially, I know the Bills are not good against the running backs in the pass game. I mean, Justice Hill is a perfect example of a running back used in the pass game who was so explosive for them. We saw him beat the Bills last time. The Ravens have just such a good team chemistry to defeat the Bills. They are just honestly like the perfect fit to go against this Bills defense. But if the Bills offensive line holds, protects Josh, lets him get into a rhythm, unlike last game kind of, he could win in a shootout against a hot, cold Ravens defense. We saw them be the worst in the league all year, up until probably the last few weeks. If this one goes into a shootout, which it seems like it might, because both defenses have struggled, I think the Bills win this one. So for that reason, and because they're home, I think the Bills win this one. I think it's got to be a high scoring game, or it'll be an extremely low scoring game, and for some reason both defenses are going to go crazy. But I think the Ravens are built so well offensively to match up against this Bills defense that I don't think the defense was so good last week. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think the defense is going to do enough to step up. The offense is going to need to carry this one, and if they want to win, they have to get points up early, and they have to control this one from the start, because the Ravens do that so often, and they put you in the trenches, and they put you 6 feet under. And we saw the Bills did not start well, right? I mean, they went into the half. It was only 10-7. The Bills need to do better than that. They need to restructure. They need to find out a way to take the Ravens and say, we're going to put up points on you before you even can blink, because that is how you beat this team. And that is why, and I think the Bills can do that. If there's any team that can do that, I think the Bills can do that. I know they start slow. I know they're a second half team, but they need to put up points in the first half. They cannot let the Ravens get ahead of them early. And if they do that, they win. If they don't, the Ravens win. But I do think the Bills have the edge here. If we were playing in Baltimore, easily would take Baltimore 9 out of 10 times. But because they're home, because they're so good at playing in Orchard Park, I think the Bills take this one. They go to the AFC Championship against the Chiefs. And boy, oh boy, we got another matchup and between Mahomes and Allen. And if any year he's going to beat him, it'll be this year. But of course, he's got to get there first. We'll maybe talk about that next week. But for me, that will do it. Those are my playoff predictions. That's my game recaps based on last week's games. Obviously, ton of news still coming out. 2-3 more weeks to go. It should be a good one. We'll talk about the Pro Bowl as well. Sure, why not? Oh, and of course, AP All-Pro. Oh well, you guys all saw it. Doesn't matter. Other than that, I will see you all next week. Maybe I'll be with James next week. We're going back to St. Bonaventure. We might be back in the radio station. But for me, that will do it. Thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye.